Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Whose Land, Whose Power? The Nexus of Renewable Energy, Land Rights, and Social Ownership. For the next hour, we'll explore the critical intersection between renewable energy development, land rights, and social ownership here in South Africa. With the help of investigative journalism and energy transition experts, as well as community advocates who will be speaking to us today, we'll examine how the renewable energy transition is reshaping power dynamics. My name is Roxanne Joseph, and I'll be facilitating today along with my colleague, Oxpeckers Assistant Editor, Thabo Mololekwa. I work with Oxpeckers as a project manager and have been helping to develop Power Tracker since 2022. Before we begin, we have a little bit of housekeeping. So please use the Q&A box for any questions that you have. And then you can use the chat box for just general comments and communications. Please do, I see already a few people have already, but please do go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're from, just so we can get to know each other a little bit. If you'd like to say something, then please raise your hand by using the raise hand icon in the bottom right, I think, of your screens. And when asked to do so, you can turn on your camera, unmute yourself, and speak. We'll also remind you about this at the end of the session, but before you leave here today, we're going to ask you to fill in a very, very short survey, just so we know who you are and to get a bit of feedback about the session. Just quickly, our agenda today will include a few words from the New Economies Hub, Sekohlani Pamodi, who's been supporting Power Tracker for the last year and a half. We'll also take a look at our Power Tracker mapping tool and share some of the impacts of our investigations. And then this will, of course, be followed by a panel discussion where we'll be looking at socially owned renewable energy and who benefits when land is being used to develop and distribute renewables. We'll have time for a couple of questions, and then we'll end with some closing remarks. I'm now very thrilled to hand over to my colleague, Thabo Mololekwa. Over to you, Thabo.
Thank you so much, Roxanne. And good morning, everyone. My name is Thabo Mololekwa. I'm an assistant editor at Oxpeckers, specifically for the Power Tracker project, the project that I will be talking about throughout this session. So, well, I saw familiar names from the people who are joining, but yeah, there are some that I don't know, and there are people that I think might not know what the Power Tracker project is. So let me start by unpacking that a little bit. So for those who don't know, Power Tracker project maps, tracks, and investigates renewable and coal-based energy sources in the country, right? When we started, well, we started focusing more on Mpumalanga, but we expanded. You will see in the map that we'll have access to some of those who don't know it. By end of this session, you will have access to the map. You will see how it works. So the project was launched in 2022 amidst the rise in climate crisis reporting. And we all know that the world at this time is facing climate emergency. And obviously, our behavior needs to somehow adapt to the situation that we are facing. So decarbonization of the economy, especially in the global south, well, I can say it is a political, economic, and social justice issue. Already at this moment, as we are talking, there are barriers to a majority of energy needs being met by renewable energy sources, right? This includes loss of work and worsening of living conditions due to retrenchments, insufficient reskilling, and opportunities as a result of a withdrawal of capital that results in ghost towns. When we visited Mpumalanga, we saw a lot of things that actually I've mentioned in this point. And these are the things you will see in some of the investigation we did. These are the things people have told us when we did some of the investigations. Fortunate enough, in this call, one of the speakers is the journalist who worked with us in some of the stories. She will actually attest to some of the things that I'm talking about. So as I'm saying that, I'm trying to come with a context in which calls for just transition originates. So a truly just transition centers on whether a working class majority can secure a shift to a renewable energy economy that serves the interest of the many. Otherwise, the risk is that wealthy, powerful minority maintains dominance, simply swapping fossil fuels for cleaner energy without transforming the underlying system that benefits them, right? So today we will delve into the concept of socially owned renewable energy. And around that, we are going to tackle some complex land-related issues. Power Tracker, as I mentioned, in the previous slide. This is a collaboration with the New Economy Hub. New Economy Hub partners with those campaigning to decarbonize South Africa and build an inclusive net zero economy that delivers social security and economic justice. So joining us today is the Hub's program director, Sikwetlane Phamodi, who will say a few words to just kick things off. Sikwetlane is an activist and a development worker and comes from a media development and good governance background. Their experience lies in building public policy and advocacy initiatives. So they will speak to the question around framework agreements for land use rights and community shareholding. And yeah, thank you so much, Sikwetlane, for joining us. Without your support, Power Tracker South Africa would not have been made possible. I'll now hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Tabo. I'm really so happy to be here. Good morning, everyone. So as Tabo said, my name is Sikwetlane, and I'm from the New Economy Hub, where we work with campaigners and strategic communicators to build authentic social support for the policies, investments, and actions that will deliver a socially inclusive and ecologically sustainable economy in South Africa. That's really what underpins our partnership with Oxpeckers. We're really privileged to be in partnership with Oxpeckers on the Power Tracker project. They've been doing some phenomenal work over the course of this partnership and the project that they've been building up these last 3 years. And I'm also all the more privileged to have been invited to do some scene setting on this really important webinar today. So today we're unpacking the less engaged but highly significant frontier of South Africa's energy transition and its intersection with the unfinished business of our national land question and its relationship with social and economic justice. South Africa's economy is built on the minerals energy nexus, as many of us know, which really was established to drive the extraction of minerals with high efficiency out of the earth and out of the country to the exclusion of the majority of our people. We've learned for decades and more how both energy generating as well as mining affected communities continue to live with injustices of these key drivers of our economy. From air quality and health impacts to environmental degradation and the consolidation of wealth in the hands of the very few owners of mega energy and mining projects without plowing back into the communities that make their stratospheric profits possible. It was really only after the advent of democracy just 30 years ago that the government established a framework condition or requirement in which social investment and benefits sharing was introduced. Many of us are familiar with these social and labor plans or the SLP frameworks that require mine and heavy industry owners to establish social compacts with the host communities of their industries to facilitate investment in these communities' lives and livelihoods over the long term, or at the very least, the course of the operation of these enterprises. So what does this have to do with the energy transition and our determination at the Hub to build socially inclusive and ecologically sustainable economies? Well, we're here because the energy transition doesn't happen in the abstract, right? It lands somewhere. And in South Africa, that somewhere is almost always land that carries a complex history of dispossession, exclusion, and unresolved rights infringements. As we look to accelerate renewable energy development, the real question that we're faced with is not whether we build these new energy projects, but how we build them, where, and for whose benefit. We will be focusing today on the questions of fair land use frameworks and meaningful community shareholding in large-scale projects. This includes exploring the strengths and weaknesses of the very practical and tested models of social ownership in the green industries of the future that we'll be hearing about today, and how these can possibly guide the light and how we can go beyond the SLP framework of the past that routinely went unfulfilled. Some of the questions that we have been asking ourselves at the Hub include: what should a framework agreement look like that allows projects to proceed efficiently, but on terms that are just, negotiated, and rooted in the principle of free, prior, and informed consent? How do we go beyond checkbox consultations and move towards real, deep, and meaningful community shareholding models that aren't just symbolic, but are structural and give communities genuine agency over their land, over revenue flows, as well as over the long-term benefits that stand to be generated? We also ask the question: does and should our current legislation adequately protect all parties, especially community people who are the most affected and least protected? And what does accountability look like in practice when these contracts and agreements are signed, but the promises remained unfulfilled? Now, Oxpeckers have gone some way in exploring some of these themes and trying to excavate some of the answers to these questions in their most recent body of work on community shareholding under the Power Tracker South Africa project. This webinar also invites us to step into the practicalities of these questions by listening to the people who have been directly involved in negotiating and implementing some of these projects, so that we can all be able to test and understand what equity could look like, not just in law, but also as a lived reality. I don't want to hold us back any further. There's some really rich experience and perspectives that are coming from the various panelists today. So without much ado, let's really just get into it. Thanks so much, Thabo, and thanks so much to the Power Tracker project and Oxpeckers for building it up as you have. Thank you.
We're now going to take a few minutes to briefly introduce you to our Power Tracker project, from our digital mapping tool to our aforementioned in-depth data-driven investigations. So as Thabo mentioned, Power Tracker maps renewable energy projects and coal-powered plants in South Africa. And today we are exceptionally proud to say that we have information on close to 800 renewable energy projects across the country. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to play a very short demonstration video just to show you the power of the Power Tracker tool. And then I'm going to hand it back to Thabo to talk about the investigations.
Power Tracker is a resource providing easy access to data on renewable energy projects and coal-powered plants across South Africa. Developed by journalists, for journalists, it maps key details like carbon footprint, impact, cost, spending, and repurposing initiatives. With the world switching to renewables and billions pledged, tracking this investment is challenging. Power Tracker was created because there was no single place to access this granular data easily. The map features icons with detailed information. You can use the category selector, search function, or alert system to find project type, capacity, cost, impact, and more. Journalists can use the tool to check data patterns or trends for investigations. At the click of a button, see where initiatives are concentrated, the most popular energy types, and how policy affects them. Power Tracker helps identify topics to build new stories through its data. You're encouraged to share data you come across. You can also request access to Power Tracker data for your research or suggest a story. Check out the stories produced using the tool on our investigations page. You can use the alert system on the map to subscribe to receive updates on either an area or a specific project by selecting Click to get alerts. Join our community.
Okay, thank you so much, Roxanne, for the video. So, as you have seen, the video that has played demonstrating how the Power Tracker tool works. So, our work has consistently spotlighted the intersection between environmental justice, transparency, and community rights. My keyword here as we are going, please mark at community rights. So this year we have taken a closer look at how these renewable energy developments are reshaping the communities, particularly focusing on who benefits when the sun shines and the wind blows. Remember that these projects, wherever they may be at a certain farm, but they are next to some community or they are within a community. So in doing so, we recognize the critical importance of community ownership and the role of community trust. These structures, often overlooked in public conversations, are meant to ensure that communities living alongside the renewable energy infrastructure see tangible and long-term benefits. But the question here is that, is this always the case? Well, that will be answered as we go. Definitely sure there are people who are coming from some of the projects we visited. They are in this call, some of them are speakers. So I'm excited to share 3 examples of compelling real-world investigations Power Tracker has conducted in the recent months into the renewable energy development across South Africa. So these 3 case studies, they highlight both the opportunity and challenges of socially inclusive renewable energy projects. I will start with a project in the Free State. There's a project called Letsatsi Solar Park. That's where we visited. It is often held up as a success story under the RIP program. That trust, this Letsatsi Solar Park Community Trust, since it was established, they received about 94 million rand, and this funding has supported various community developments initiative showed how RIP policies can have a real local impact when implemented properly. And just to note, these projects are the projects that we visited and saw them. It's not something that we read and we are not sure if it's there or it's not there. We went to Free State and saw these projects and how they are utilizing the funds within the community. So interestingly, when we first set out to investigate the community trust linked to IPPs across the country, we were struck by how little is publicly known about them. That was the first thing, or even if they exist, because people do know that when there is this kind of infrastructure next to them, they somehow need to benefit. And all our people think about is that the benefit is all about job creation, right? And nothing else. That's why they don't even know that there are structures as a community trust that is there to actually serve the needs of the communities. So we started with a simple question: are these trusts really making a difference for the communities they are meant to serve? Letsatsi provides evidence that when policy tools like the 2.5 community ownership requirements are enforced, they can deliver substantial benefits. And to those who don't know, before I go to the next slide, Roxanne, I'm talking about the 2.5 community ownership requirement. I feel that I don't have to assume that everybody in this call is a person who's within the renewable energy space and know what this 2.5% I'm talking about is. So all these infrastructures you see around when you travel in the Eastern Cape or Western Cape, you will see these big solar farms and wind farms. As I mentioned, that not far from those, there are certain communities. The government says, or the RIP says, those communities they must at least benefit 2.5% of the revenue of those infrastructures, right? And I've seen some other projects who are actually contributing as more as a 15 to 20% to their communities. So that's where I just don't want you to be lost. So you understand where does this 2.5% we'll be talking about comes from. And I'm sure some of our panelists will also unpack it for you because they work within that. So after we have visited Free State, we went to the Eastern Cape. We visited Wesley Ciskei Wind Farm. This investigation actually brought together land justice and socially owned renewable energy in action. Wesley Ciskei is a powerful example of community-led, done very differently. This project is located on a land owned by 11 Black landowners, situated in the former Transkei and Ciskei homelands. And if if I miss something or I misinterpret something, I'm so happy because the people from this project, both of them, it might even happen that it's more of them, they are actually in this call and they will have a chance to actually tell us about Wesley Ciskei. So Wesley Ciskei was championed by Zukisani Chagavula, who is a local community member who saw the opportunity for renewable energy to uplift his community. The landowners have secure title deeds and they have negotiated lease agreements with the wind farm. And one of the things that sets this project apart is the revenue sharing model. The landowners receive a rental income equivalent to 1.5% of the wind farm revenue from the electricity sold to Eskom. So that's why we say this links the project success directly to local ownership and benefits. I don't want to delve a lot into Wesley Ciskei. Their people will have the opportunity to talk. Our most recent investigation looked at the more technical but equally important innovation, virtual wheeling. This word itself, it's very technical, and one might ask themselves that in the puzzle of just energy transition, where does this virtual wheeling fall? So yeah, it is some kind of a complicated way. So in this model, in this case, I'll be referring to the Silimela Solar Park that we visited in the Northwest. In this model, electricity generated from Silimela Solar Park is virtually wheeled to factories in KwaZulu-Natal and the Western Cape via a wheeling agreement with the Eskom Transition Network. This project, developed by the South African company, the Solar Group, it is taking a place on a grazing land leased from two farmers who each, I'm going to mention figures, who each of them earn a rental of about R1 million a year. The project avoids new transmission infrastructure by using Eskom's existing network to deliver the renewable energy across the provinces, which is a potential milestone for corporate emissions reductions. And what stood out from this one is that although there isn't a formal community trust, now I just want to be clear on this one. And as we talk, I think I stand to be corrected by our panelists and other people who are here. Not every solar or wind project you see is part of the RIP. I just want to clarify this point that what stood out in that investigation is that the solar project in the Northwest, the Silimela Solar Park, doesn't have a formal community trust. And one would ask that if there's no community trust, then how do the communities benefit? So communities, the RIP says the communities must, it is a must if the project is under RIP. But this one is not under RIP, meaning the company have to decide for themselves what kind of benefits they project to the community, and if whether they want to do that, by the way. So Solar has taken steps to ensure that local communities, they benefit within where they operate. This has included the investments to local education, enterprise development, infrastructure. Well, for us, this somehow demonstrates that private renewable energy initiatives can proactively incorporate social value. This case provides an example of how voluntary community investment can be built into innovative energy projects, and how such models could evolve alongside formal government frameworks. So across these case studies that I have mentioned, right, community ownership model shows what's possible when local landowners are at the center of renewable energy projects, demonstrating the power of agency and grassroots leadership. So firstly, the Litsatsi case study that I mentioned earlier illustrates how policy enforcement can deliver real, measurable impact, proving that when requirements are implemented transparently, they can indeed uplift the communities. Then there's the Limela Virtual Wheeling project that I just mentioned. It also offers a promising model for how private renewable energy developments, even outside formal frameworks of the RIP, can still channel meaningful benefits to the local communities through voluntary initiatives and partnership. So all these stories, they show that inclusive renewable energy is already happening, from local ownership to voluntary community benefits. Power Tracker has helped to ensure that these wins are visible, shared, and scaled, so that people can see them. Because one of the challenges you would find when you visit the communities, people will say, these projects are there, but we don't see the benefits. Nothing is happening. That's why we decided to visit the community trust and show the people that these are the structures or the bodies you must go to when you actually need to see, or you want to see some kind of a change within your communities because of these bigger infrastructures that are within your communities. The energy transition must not just be green, but always it must be fair and community powered. Yeah, I think I've said a lot of things, and I'm definitely thinking that people are burning with questions. But before we go to that, the interesting part of today, we have our panel that I will introduce. The panel in today's topic: whose land, whose power, the nexus of renewable energy, land rights, and social ownership. So we will now move on to the launch, a panel discussion with three experts who know all about the complex relationship between renewable energy development, land rights, and social ownerships. First, we have Mareka Mukwatlo, a community energy activist who founded Ahimsa, a social enterprise she registered in 2018. Mareka is also a researcher with the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, NMMU, in the PE, formerly known as Gqeberha. She has played, now known as Gqeberha, by the way, formerly known as PE. She has played a significant role in several key national initiatives, contributing to research commissioned by the PCC and the National Research Foundation. So Mareka brings a broad and grounded view of how social ownership is unfolding across the country, drawing on both policy level insights and field-based experiences in renewable energy, land rights, and economic justice. Secondly, we will also hear from Luthando Nokwebu, who serves on the committee of the Ngadolwethu Trust, which represent community interest in the Wesley Ciskei wind farm. In this role, she contributes to governance and oversight with the focus of ensuring that local communities benefit meaningfully from renewable energy investment. She brings first-hand experience of what negotiations between landowners and the renewable energy companies look like. And then we will also hear from Tunisia Phillips. She's an investigative award-winning journalist who has what I liked about us journalists, we don't want the word award-winning to be left out if we have won those awards. So she's an award-winning journalist who has worked with us in the Power Tracker project and in broadcast for more than a decade. Her focus is on environmental and climate change reporting. She also offers training, facilitation, and coordination. We invited these experts so that they can shed light on social ownership within the context of renewable energy. We will start things off with Mareka. Please, Mareka, can you describe in detail what socially owned renewable energy in South Africa look like, and what kind of impact is it having?
Thank you, Thabo, for that question. And also, I think setting the scene between you and Sukwetlane, you set such a beautiful scene in terms of understanding and explaining that nexus between land rights, renewable energy and social ownership as well. So I'm very glad to take, I think, this discussion further. And I would like to start by us, I think, defining what we mean by socially owned renewable energy in the context of a just energy transition, right? So the concept refers to a socio-economic model of energy generation that is owned and controlled by working class communities, whether through cooperatives or trusts, by municipalities or public interest entities. And there could be a partnership amongst these ownership categories as well. So socially owned renewables is not private for-profit entities. There's no individual ownership of the facility, right? And that speaks to the fundamental principles of SOAR as a concept. And it is rooted in the principles of equity, democratic participation, and local socio-economic benefit. There are a number of models that were identified in our study, the PCC study that was published in 2024. And we categorize them into 4 models. Firstly, you find the mini grids, which are there for providing energy access in rural areas and informal settlements who have no grid access. And this could be, municipal owned or Eskom owned facilities. Then you have the grid-tied model, which is a cooperatively owned grid-tied solar PV or wind energy system using, existing urban infrastructure. And that facility is feeding into or wheeled via the municipal or Eskom grid. Thirdly, you have the REAP model, which is obviously large-scale energy generation by private companies and based on community-owned land that is selling to Eskom. And this REAP model reflects a passive ownership by communities at an average of about 10% shareholding and or rental income. And I think you have already shared some key findings and case studies with regards to the REAP model. And then the final model is the worker-owned model, which is, a worker share or direct ownership of energy, of embedded generation system, whether on, on factories, mines, or repurposed power stations. And this is where also mining affected communities may fall under this category as well. Yes, these models are all tentative and limited in terms of, a number of issues as well. And this is due to a number of factors, Thabo, such as, your passive ownership structures, as mentioned earlier, under the REAP model, where communities have little control. And I'm glad that you highlighted that 2.5% ownership of it. And we know that, yes, there is the issue of very limited control and ownership in those facilities. Furthermore, there is still limitations for grassroots projects, which include the current financial and economic models to support the implementation or enable the implementation of socially owned renewables. There are some regulatory issues that we are still investigating also as researchers, to ensure that, socially owned renewables, there are policies in place that enable the implementation of this concept. There are issues from a technical perspective, the grid access, and it's good to hear that, there is funding allocated now to expand the transmission, which is obviously the distribution of electricity as well. Critically also, the community capacity to own and manage these facilities. Those are some of the limitations that we have come across. Yes, there are promising examples as well, and I'm glad that you have highlighted them, and especially the REAP model that reflect a direct community revenue, contributing to local employment and skills development. And also, this model offers that potential alignment with land justice movements. Other grant-funded pilot projects that I would like to highlight as an example, for instance, which, by the way, we are still in the process of assessing the viability of this model. First one is the grid-tied solar PV generation that is owned by Saltuba Cooperative in Nelson Mandela Bay. And I will share those details so that they are included on the power tracker as well. We are currently expanding that from a 5 kilowatt to a 25 kilowatt system. So it is completely owned by the cooperative. It's plugged into the municipal grid. And the only thing is now realizing the revenue from selling that power to either the municipality or via wheeling to a third party. And then there is also a potential, to have a combination of a mini grid and REAP model in Limpopo, in around Ephraim Mohali local municipality, one rural village there, and which, it's still at the early stages of conducting that feasibility study. Also, the repurposing of decommissioned power stations. There is also an opportunity to realize the fourth model, which is the worker-owned model, but also working with community affected, mining affected communities as well, including obviously those, for instance, with the Skukuni mining affected communities, whereby they are, engaging with the local mining communities to establish a socially owned renewable. So in conclusion, Thabo, SOAR is still in its early stages, but it does have significant transformative potential. There is momentum building among civil society and policymakers for a more democratic, inclusive energy system. And importantly, socially owned renewable projects are increasingly linked to land justice as communities seek to reclaim or repurpose land for renewable energy to ensure a more equitable access to the energy infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Marika. And yeah, that was very informative and yeah, very interesting information there. And now let's go to Luthando. So Luthando, maybe what we need you to explain to us, just give us what is the relationship between the IPPs and the surrounding communities, including landowners on whose land these renewable energy projects are developed.
I see that the chat inbox is getting really heated, but the relationship between IPP and its surrounding communities is often complex. Ideally, it should be built on mutual trust, respect, and transparency, especially benefit sharing. But in reality, communities are sometimes treated as stakeholders in name only, consulted after decisions have been made, or offered short-term jobs while long-term profits go elsewhere. For landowners, particularly, those holding communal or trust land, there can be pressure to sign lease agreements without fully understanding the long-term implications or true value of their land. Now, as a trust in Ngadolwetu, we've learned that communities need to be proactive, demanding clear benefit sharing models, fair leases, and equity in the project itself. A just relationship is one where communities are not passive hosts, but active co-owners in the renewable energy future. So our IPP, we had the privilege of building a relationship and a rapport when it comes to ironing out lease issues and community project. It was not always the case with the change in management, lack of experience on our end as landowners and trust, but as we became more equipped and knowledgeable, this enabled us to move in a more positive direction.
Thank you so much, Luthando. Thank you so much. And yeah, obviously a lot of questions will be coming. Let's go to Tunisia Phillips, who has actually worked or investigated these stories, and she went and interacted with the communities. So from your side, Tunisia, maybe if you can explain how are communities, particularly in the mining affected communities, using the rise of the renewables to benefit themselves?
Thank you, Thabo, and good morning to everyone. I think, we have to consider that historically it's not as if we did not have laws or, for example, the mining charter, and, like policies with good intention to sort of, ensure that they are, that communities benefit, like from mining and from the expansion of new energy projects and the likes. But we have seen also that historically disadvantaged communities who are affected by mining activities have often, ended up on the short end of the stick. And I just want to emphasize that renewable energy is an opportunity to rectify some of those things. So I think with renewable energy, and I did the case study on the Wesley Siskay project, was that the leasing agreements is a financial benefit that goes directly to landowners. And I want to emphasize that this is privately owned land, and it's Black landowners, some of them farmers, who, are benefiting financially from their lease agreements. But at the same time, there is a cooperative stakeholder shareholding, in the project as well, that goes beyond just the landowners. And what's interesting about that is also the dividends go directly to the shareholding, and they can decide what they will do with that money, whether they're going to use it for personal use or whether they're going to run community development projects or create new job and economic opportunities. So that really stood out for me. And I think, just more meaningful consultation, there's an opportunity for that. But if our government and, if we do not as previous speakers have said, if we do not resolve the land question, if international companies and developers are coming to South Africa looking for land, to build a wind farm or a solar farm and the likes, and the bottlenecks in terms of just dealing with the land question and ownership, communally with communal owned land, they kind of just steer away from it because it is so heavy with red tape, and it takes so long. And I mean, even with Black owned private land, like with the Wesley Ciskei project, you'll see that the likes of Zuki, who I know has joined the webinar and is interacting with everybody in the messages. They took at least a year and spent about R1 million on private investigators to track down the rightful owners of the land in terms of these families, because originally the land was transferred to 3 people, and obviously families grow, and so yeah, there's opportunity for a lot of financial benefits and to redress old models and to look at why implementation of the likes of the mining charter, and even though mining companies have had ESGs all along, why implementation just seems to not provide the kind of value that communities sort of expect. But what I can say is that it's refreshing to see models in the energy development landscape, as we're seeing, like, with the Wesley Ciskei project. It does, show that there's a promising opportunity for a really just and inclusive sort of energy transition. And I think that communities will be glad to know that they can benefit from these kind of activities without harming their land, without harming their soil. And the fact that they can continue with local economic activities like agriculture is something that, is like a major benefit, considering how we've seen what mining, extractives and fossil fuels have done to local lands, to water resources, and to the quality of the soil.
Thank you. I think we are going to end off with a few closing remarks. Firstly, if you haven't used our geojournalism mapping tool, Power Tracker, then please do. You can either scan the QR code on the screen or go to oxpeckers.org. We hope you enjoy exploring the tool and that you obviously find it useful. And please do let us know if you have any feedback, because we are constantly improving the tool based on feedback from users. You can also download some of the data sets from our investigations by visiting our Get the Data page. Here you'll find data sets that have been aggregated to help tell some of the important stories that we've been investigating and publishing through Power Tracker. As you heard from our speakers today, we have a long road ahead of us in tracking the just energy transition, as is evident by the chat box. Our Power Tracker team will persist, will continue to build data sets, continue to add to our map, and of course, continue to publish in-depth and data-driven investigations. We'd like to thank the African Climate Foundation's New Economy Hub, and of course, we'd also like to thank our panelists for the insights and their learnings and for sharing those with us today. Once again, we encourage you to spend time on Power Tracker and let us know what you think. You can also follow us on social media for updates, future events, and opportunities. Thank you so much. We appreciate your participation today.